Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Fun with Robotics. And if you've watched any of my previous videos, you may have noticed that I've moved my intro board here to this corner of the garage because I needed to move the Bridgeport milling machine, which used to sit right about there, over to that side of the garage, because when the garage door goes up, the space was too low for me to tilt the head of the milling machine vertical. So I moved it to that side of the garage, and of course, because I used to do the video intros over there, I had to move it over here, and so we'll just make do with this little corner of the garage for now. And by the way, probably within the next month or two, I'll be doing a video series on how to program and operate the Bridgeport V2 XT with a DX32 controller. It's old technology. It's circa mid-1990s, maybe 1997 a controller, but it's still quite effective and easy to program. So that should be an interesting little side set of videos. But today's video is going to be about the wood storage carts that I've really needed to build, because after having built all of these organizational carts to organize my tools and my supplies, I've really ended up with a lot of extra wood, both 2x material and sheet goods. So my garage over there was really getting to be quite a mess. Even though I had some shelves to put it on, it just was not doing the trick. So I built two carts. Today's a 2-for-1 deal. One to store 2x material and one to store sheet goods. And I'm actually quite happy with the 2x material storage cart, but not quite so much with the sheet goods material. I've got a little bit of an issue with it, that it's not quite as efficient as it could be with the space. So let me take you over there and show you what I'm talking about, and then I think I'm going to do a little bit of a redesign of the sheet goods material cart and see if I can't make it a little bit more efficient and store more material. So let's go have a look. So here are the two carts. On my left is the cart I built for storing 2x material, and on the right is the cart I built for storing sheet goods. I think I'm going to talk about the 2x storage cart first, because I'm not going to be doing any modifications to this one, and then I'll come back, I'll talk about this one and what I find wrong with it and what I'm going to do. So this one, I took a lot of cues from Steve Ramsey's storage cart build. He had a lot of really good ideas. I think I scaled it up a little bit on this one from his design, but it's working out really well. On the end here, I've got some vertical storage, just bins, and that just helps me divide up different types of materials. Like I had some PVC pipe stored in one and some trim in the other, and then just some longer pieces. And that works out pretty well for just sort of random stuff that you want to store. And then on the other side, I just have really just some shelves here for storing random size 2x pieces. It also sort of became a dumping ground for some small sheet good pieces as well, and some oddly shaped pieces that I didn't really want to throw away, some circular pieces that I thought I might be able to use them at some point in the future. So on this side, it's just really nothing more than shelves, and they're supported. It does get a little bit it gets heavy, so it's supported with some bracing in the back that it's just screwed to this this backing 2x. To this plywood material. So there's definitely support here, here, and here. It's not going to sag unless you put a lot of weight right here. It's not going to sag. So, or at least it hasn't so far. But the main point of this storage cart is to store 2x material. So I've got a number of bins here And the way it's laid out was there are dividers in here that separate out the different sizes. So, for example, here I have like almost a 1 foot piece of 2x4 material, and it fits right in there, and then there's a divider that stops it. So this is storage for 1 foot 2x4s or 2x6s or 2x8s, and then on the other side of this divider, since this is 4 foot long, would be a slot for 3 foot 2x4s. And then coming up one, this is almost a 2 foot length of 2x4, and there's a divider there. So this is good for 2 foot pieces or smaller. And on the other side, obviously, since this is a 4 foot long cart, 2 foot on the other side. And then here, if you go up one more, there's a divider at 3 foot. So this side would be good for 3 foot, and the other side would be good for more 1 foot size 2x materials. And then this top one here, not the top, total top, but near the top is 4 foot long. So you could put 4 foot 2x material here. The bottom goes all the way through. And the idea was really to have not just one of these, but 2 of them connected, so that you would have spots for an 8 foot 2x4, and then a 1 foot and 7 foot and 2 foot and 6 foot and then 3 foot and then 5 foot and then 4 and 4, and then the top you could just put whatever you wanted, like maybe trim material, whatever length. So this is just sort of like some extra storage at the top for whatever didn't quite fit into the bins of the other categories. So that was the idea. The problem was, first of all, this thing is pretty heavy. It doesn't move all that easy. I mean, that might be part of the problem might be the casters. I'm using the steel casters because it is very heavy, and I don't even think that the urethane casters are going to cut it on this, even if I went with 6 of them, because it does get extremely heavy. And then to double that length and make it 8 foot, well, it's getting pretty unwieldy, and I don't think I really have the space to move something 8 foot long by this wide around. So I kind of, and the other thing was that this build was getting a little bit expensive because I'm using 3/4 inch plywood here and here and here, and for the bottom. So building another one was going to be, an even more expense. So for the moment, at least, I'm just going to leave it as it is. And the longer, anything longer than maybe 5 foot 2x material will either go on the top. I'll stack. I'm going to put some pieces here so that I don't hit my head on it, which shouldn't be too much of a problem. I'm not that tall. I can stack longer pieces on the top, and then in the bottom it goes all the way through, and I could put maybe 5, 6 foot pieces down there, and then anything longer than that I'm just going to stack in the corner of the garage for now. So I'm going to kind of abandon the idea of having 2 of them so that I could store 8 foot long pieces. It might be a good idea to have this maybe 5 foot or 6 foot long. I just don't want to go through that expense and that trouble right now. Plus you'd have to redesign this because you've got a 4 foot piece of plywood here. You'd have to get another one that's maybe another foot or 2 foot. It would get a little complicated. So at least for now, this is working out pretty well. It stores a lot of material. So I'm just going to leave it as is. Now over here is the sheet goods storage cart. And this has also worked out pretty well. I don't have any major problems with it, but I think the idea was to have one side for one of these slots for 3/4 inch plywood, one for 1/2 inch plywood, and then maybe some smaller sheet goods stacked in the bottom, and then up here I've got a shelf, and then you've also got some room over here for maybe like pegboard, some thin 1/4 inch stuff over here, And then on the top, also there's room to store cut off pieces here. And that's actually worked out pretty well too, because I have a lot of pieces that are, you know, in the roughly 1.5 to 2.5 feet by, you know, 1 foot size. So you can kind of organize them and stack them up here on the shelf. And this is just sort of a little divider, so you don't have just one large space to stack them all in. And that actually helps a little bit too. Plus there's a little bit of an angle to this. It tilts back, so that helps just keep them in place when things are moving around. So the problem is that I guess the way I constructed it, my idea was to build these center pylons to keep this thing very rigid. And it's really, you know, it's got 2 sides of plywood on it. And that idea worked quite well. I mean, this thing is very rigid. And then I'm thinking, well, you know what, I'm kind of losing a lot of space here, because if I made these 2x4s a little thinner, and then instead of having a pylon here in the center, I could gain another, you know, 2-3 inches of storage space. So then I could add some more sheet goods. And then at the top, I could use some sort of gusset plate to stiffen it up, rather than just you know, relying on these pylons to keep it stiff. So, oh, and the other thing was, when I built the sides here, I just toe nailed it, or in this case, toe screwed it together. So these joints are nothing more than it's a butt joint from 2x to 2x, and then it's screwed on the top and the bottom. It's okay, it works, but it would be really nice to maybe do sort of a half lap joint to make it a little bit nicer. And then here on this shelf, I think I need to maybe make this a little taller. Happens if you start stacking things here, they kind of tend to get a little bit off kilter, and then they can kind of flop out. So having a little bit taller shelf bracket here would help keep things from falling off. And so I think maybe what else I'll do is to extend the width of this. I really don't want to make it much wider, but just to pick up a little bit more room in the middle, I may put another 2x4 on each side, pick up 3 inches, and it'll still be reasonably thin and be able to move this thing around in the shop without too much difficulty, but I'll be able to gain another almost 3 inches here in the center. So I'll have the 2 sides here, then I'll have a spot for, you know, 1/2 inch, 3/4, and then I'll also have another spot for more material there. So I'm going to do that, and hopefully it won't take me 6 days like I had to work on the glue cart. Hopefully I can do it in about a day. If it comes back and this thing is painted blue, it's going to be my last video, because I don't want to spend 6 days doing this. So I hope it goes a little bit better than it went for the glue cart. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back and I'll show you the results. Well, the good news is it didn't take me 6 days. The bad news is it took me probably about 2 full days to complete the changes to the storage cart for sheet goods. Honestly, if I had known it was going to take that long, I probably would have just lived with the cart as it was. But since I've already made the changes, you know, I'll talk about exactly what I did differently on the revised version of the sheet goods cart. So the first thing I did was to pack out the sides with an extra 2x4 here on this side and that side to give me an extra 3 inches of storage space. And doing that, I feel like it's still, you know, not too wide. It's easy to maneuver around within the garage and get it to where you need it to be. So, you know, adding that extra space really hasn't caused any kind of issue. Also on the sides here, I made these side panels a little bit taller than they were, because I was having some issues when stacking stuff here. sometimes you'd get things tending to flop out, and I think with a little bit taller wall here, it will help with that issue. So this wall and that wall were made a little bit taller. Also, previously, the pylon in the center here, there was a solid piece of plywood, blocking it, and obviously you couldn't get stuff in there. So with this new design, I needed to put an extra piece of plywood in the center here, just to support any pieces that you're sliding in there. So I cut a piece of plywood to put in the center. All of the uprights and cross members I decided to put through the thickness planer. I took them down from the typical 1.5 inches down to about 1.25 inches. That gave me an extra inch of storage space because a 1/4 inch from each of the four adds up to an extra inch of width in place where I can add sheet goods. So that was sort of a side benefit of putting things through the thickness planer. And that took quite a bit of time, actually. I mean, there's a fair amount of feet board here to run through the thickness planer. Probably each board had to go through maybe 4 or 5 times to get it down to 1.25 inches. So that took a while to do that. And it really cleaned up the surface of the boards and made the edges of these cross members and uprights nice and crisp, so that when you're doing your half-lap joints with the dado blades, it just makes it easier to test fit them and find out when you've got it at the perfect depth here. So that was really one of the main reasons that I wanted to put them through the thickness planer. It just makes it easier to work with. The half-lap joints, there's quite a few of them. I counted, I think, 64, believe it or not. I mean, you look at it, you go, where the heck are 64 half-lap joints? But if you count all of the points at which they come together, there's 64 of them, and each one of them took maybe about 5 or 6 passes through the dado blades to make the actual cut. So you're talking roughly about 400 passes through the dado blades to cut all of the half-lap joints for the uprights and the cross members. So that was quite a bit of work. They did actually go together quite nicely. When I went to go and assemble it, first thing I did was I put these cross members on the bottom, and this board here, in fact all of these along the bottom and the ones along the top, have a 3-degree angle cut into them, and it gave me a chance to use my ripping blade for my table saw. And I could notice a huge difference in using a ripping blade versus a cross-cut blade to cut through this material. I could easily move the boards through the saw at 2 to 3 times the speed of using a cross-cut blade versus the ripping blade. So that worked out really nice. Made a nice smooth cut, and then once I had it at that 3-degree angle, I drilled holes with a Forstner bit, 2 here and then 1 here on each end. I drilled them about halfway down. I'll bring the camera in a minute and give you a close-up look of it. But about halfway down, and then once I got it cut halfway down, I took a regular drill bit and finished it all the way through. And then I just used maybe like a 2-inch drywall screw and screwed these down to the surface of the cart, because there's 2 2x4s going across the middle, there's 2 on the end, and here on the end, and so the screws go right through the plywood and into the 2x4 structural members on the bottom. So when I did that, these things were super solid. I mean, they were nice and straight and they didn't move, and that allowed me to then start to assemble it by screwing these uprights here. And once I screwed these to the bottom pieces, I could just put the cross members in, drill them, pre-drill them, and then screw it together. And it went together, pretty much like a dream. No issues there. The only thing I did run into was the fact that I screwed up a little bit by putting the half-lap joints on the back here for this one. I really wanted them all on the front, which meant that once I got this one in place, I couldn't screw here. So I had to unscrew the bottom, take the frame off, put this top member on, screw it in, and then put it back, and then rescrew the bottom one. So it was a little bit of a juggling act to get everything screwed together. But it really wasn't that difficult once I worked out the pattern. Let's see. The top here, this gusset plate, is used to stiffen everything up. The pylon used to be the main stiffening agent for the way it was designed before. But now, since I've got an opening here, I basically went with a wide gusset plate at the top. And this is really, it's very strong. There's no issue with it moving or shaking or flopping in the breeze. It's really quite rigid. And I think it might be a little bit of an overkill here. This is about 9 inches tall. I think I probably could have cut it down to 6 and it still would have been just fine. But I didn't know. That's the problem. I didn't know exactly how much I was going to need, or even if this was going to make it rigid enough to be usable. Turns out it is, and it works just fine. The only drawback with it being this tall is that now this shelf up here, it's pretty high here. So anything stacked up here, I got to kind of reach up to get it, or stand up and find what I need up there at the top. Also, I moved this roller here to the center because I'm going to be storing probably the thickest boards, 3/4 inch plywood or really heavy MDF in the center section. And this roller basically just helps you feed it in and out. So you pick it up, all you have to do is get up the corner up onto the roller, and you can sort of feed it in, and just slides right in. And the same thing coming back out. So it just makes getting boards in and out of this center section a lot easier. What else? I think that's probably about it. The only other thing is this shelf here. I moved these braces from the bottom to the top. That just means I can allow things to extend out a little bit further down here. So I got some longer pieces. And then obviously I'm a bit constrained up here because of these end pieces, but it's really 6 of one, half of the other, whether it's down here or above here. So the only thing I might do is make this thing a little bit taller, make it come up to about here, because I'm having the same issues with stuff that's stored here as I did here. So doing the same thing that I did down here, maybe put a piece a little bit taller here, and that should really help with sheet goods stored up at the top. Well, I'm really happy with the way it came out, even though it was a lot of work. I think we're good to go at this point. I'm just going to take it over to the other garage and start loading it up with sheet goods and using it for what it was intended for. So I'll see you at the wrap-up. Here's a quick look at the Forstner bit holes that I drilled on the bottom cross members right here. So I just drilled, and then once I got it down to about here, I used a regular drill bit to finish the hole, and then did nothing but screw a 2.5 inch drywall screw through into the bottom. There's actually 2 2x4s going across here, and then there's actually 2 2x4s on the ends. So you can't see it because of the half lap joint, but there is another screw. I think it's on this side. I think it's right about here. It's holding it down. Just one screw here and one screw on the other end, and then 2 in the middle. And that held it extremely firmly down to the surface of the cart. So that worked out really well. Well, that's a wrap for episode 11 and the wood storage carts. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'd like to suggest that you check in next week and the following week when I'm doing 2 more storage carts that are of unique design. I haven't seen anything quite like them on any YouTube channel or on the web anywhere, so you might want to check them out. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, if you have any questions, you can send an email to info@theroboticscodedepot.com, and don't forget to check out the website also, theroboticscodedepot.com, because there's always cool information being posted there. So I will see you next time.